Alrighty, and we're recording. Just want to welcome FEDUPBIZOWNER to the Tucson Blockchain channel. And this guy is pretty awesome. He's been on a couple of podcasts that I would highly suggest. One is the Dr. Dark After Dark podcast, and then the What Bitcoin Did podcast. And he's got a really interesting perspective on the world of small businesses and lending. So yeah, could you give the listeners a little bit of a background?
Yeah, so I graduated high school in 2001. I sort of fell into franchise financing. Well, let me rephrase. I went to college after high school, clearly, and I graduated and sort of fell into a company that did franchise financing. I had no idea what the hell that was. I was literally, 21 years old and said, okay, how do I make as much money as possible, as quickly as possible? My background was in political science. I interviewed with the city to be a probation officer, to be a cop, to, do social work, whatever the case may be. And I was like, yeah, there's just not enough money here. So I interviewed with about 20 companies, had a bunch of offers, and I just chose a company that, I had an interview, I felt comfortable. And, the way their program worked, it was you make what you earn. And there's no limit. And if you work hard, you get the connections, you do what you do, literally sky's the limit. Being 21 years old, law student debt, I said, let's roll. And it just so happened that I stumbled into a very, very, very niche segment of the economy, which is franchising and specifically franchise financing. Now, it's grown a lot since I started, 15 years ago. It's currently 10% of GDP, in terms of franchises. And I've sort of grown right along with it. Worked for the company I was with for about 10 years, went to law school during that time at night, graduated, got my law degree, passed the bar, and then eventually started my own company, offering franchise lending and consulting services to, clients of multiple concepts throughout the country, big, small, startups, things everybody's familiar with, Domino's, Taco Bell, Planet Fitness. I work up and down the spectrum of the industry. And I sort of just grown with it as things has developed.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's definitely not a lot of money working as a cop or a social worker or probation officer. So what are franchises and how do they work?
So basically, like, a franchise is as simple as this. Somebody has an idea. It's a good idea. And they don't want to, build 700 units themselves. So rather than build it all themselves and deal with the operational issues and the management issues and all the personnel issues that come with it, they basically just sub-license out areas to people, you, me, your parents, your friends, whoever, that believe in the concept and are like, you know what, that's a good idea. I like it. I didn't come up with it on my own, but, they offer me scale. They offer me, products at a discount that I can sell to make more money versus what I could buy on my own. And things of that nature. So basically, if you're going to buy a franchise, you're buying into someone's idea that you didn't think of and that you can't do better for cheaper. Because obviously with a franchise, you pay a royalty to the franchisor for their marketing, for the product discount, for scale, things like that. So typically the royalty fees are about 8% off the top, which, for some things you could consider excessive, but I want you to think of it this way. If you want to open a gym, yeah, you could open a gym, right? But do you know Joe Smith Gym or do you know Planet Fitness Gym, right? Where are you more likely to go if you're faced with a choice and don't know, well, I don't really know Joe's Gym and I know Planet. I know they're good. I know what it looks like. Where am I going to go as a consumer? So if you have that value add, it makes a lot of sense to use a franchise. If you're gonna buy the franchise. If you don't see that, and here's an example, there's dog daycare franchises. Why do you need a franchise for dog daycare? Just go advertise in your community. Why are you going to pay somebody 8% for something you could send out flyers for? Right? Like, I don't see the scale in certain concepts that someone can't do on their own and save that 8%, because a lot of times that 8% is your bottom line between profitability or unprofitability. So you just have to think about it in terms of, what does the franchise itself give to me, right? Like McDonald's, right? If you have a McDonald's, everybody knows McDonald's. That's great. You have name recognition. If you don't have that, or there's no value add in terms of pricing of the products that are offered, a franchise doesn't really make sense. But if you have it, franchising makes lots of sense.
Yeah, it seems like a very valuable thing to have a brand. I know when I go through the airport, I'm likely to get McDonald's just because I'm familiar with what it is. And
right. Are you gonna go to the Joe Smith Burger Shack, or are you gonna go to McDonald's? You're exactly talking about what the value is. And that works the same throughout pretty much all concepts. And you just have to decide, because if you're a business owner, you have to decide if you want to give somebody 8% of your gross revenue right off the top, because that's a huge number in a lot of cases, right? If you have $1 million in sales, you're giving somebody, $80,000 just to put their name on your sign. So, I mean, it's a lot to consider, and there really has to be a value add in order to get into the space. But I will tell you, the model works and there is value add, but not with every franchise concept. With the good ones, there's definitive value add.
Sure. So where are we at right now in regards to the lending market? How is that looking?
Well, if you had asked me this 2 weeks ago, I would have told you lending market was back on. So from March through, what are we, September? March through the end of August, it was like there was a giant dam in terms of lending. So, it in the franchise market, which realistically is just small and medium businesses, right? Guys that own 1, 2, 3, 4 units, not, $100 million software companies. These are your neighbors that own 4 restaurants or 4 gyms or 4 massages, 4 massage clinics or 4 wax centers or things like that, right? These are small business owners. From March through, say, August, it's like there was a brick wall for lending. Through the end of August, I should say. And it didn't matter what you did, what your sales were, conventional, SBA, just impossible to get money. Now, there are exceptions to that, right? If you're a legacy brand, think like Domino's, McDonald's, Taco Bell, anything you could literally name off the top of your head. For instance, if you get off the highway, if your name was on the there's food at this exit sign, brands like that. If you're on that list, you could probably get money. If you were not, you were not getting money. And it honestly didn't even matter your sales. You could be thriving through COVID, through the shutdowns and everything that was going on. You couldn't get money. And I'd say right after Labor Day, it was like a switch flipped. And I got approvals through SBA, through conventional. I had private equity guys begging for deals, hedge funds. What do you got? Let's go. it was like the credit market was like, all right, we're back. But since Monday, I feel like we've shut down and hit a dam again. So I really honestly don't have an honest to goodness feel for where we are. I thought I did 2 weeks ago. I thought I did 3 months ago, which was, in terms of the lending market is zero. Then I thought we were back, and now I honestly don't know. I don't know if there's something going on behind the scenes, but it just seems like lending has been put on hold again. And that's not going to be good if that happens again.
So when lending is put on hold like that, what are the impacts on the economy as a whole?
I mean, I can't speak to the global economy, but in my world, if there's no lending, you can't grow, right? So there's a couple impacts. The biggest one is, well, let me restate this. If you have a business that is stable, right? Say you own you familiar with Jersey Mike's? I'm sure you are, with where you live.
Yeah.
Great brand, right? So say you own a Jersey Mike's sub shop. Say you own 4 of them in Phoenix, and you're doing fine. Okay, well, there's no harm, no foul, right? If you're not trying to expand, or you don't need to refinance your debt because you can't make your payments, or you're just in a spot where you can stay status quo. Honestly, the lending market shutting down doesn't matter, as long as you can pay your bills. Where it matters is if you're struggling and could use a lifeline of some working capital. And do me a favor, follow up with me on what those programs look like in 5 minutes. Or you are a 5-unit operator who wants to buy 2 additional units in your market from underperforming franchisees who are hurting your profitability because they're run poorly. You can't get money to buy them. So it's downstream effects more so than necessarily an impact. It impacts growth. It impacts, profitability if guys around you are not performing correctly, and upholding brand standards. But say you're a guy with 15 units and you want to buy somebody with 5 units, you can't do that if there's no money. And that's the issue you have. The economy stagnates, right? You can't, I like to frame it like this. Sharks like to eat. If the lending shut down, sharks can't eat. And, whether that's good or not, meaning there's more people who have jobs because, I'm a small business owner with 1 unit and I still own it and I'm paying my bills and I can live great. Okay, that's fine. But at the end of the day, the guy with 50 units who wants to go to 100, he wants to buy you. And if that guy can't get money to buy you, it slows down economic growth because the guy with 50 is going to make things more profitable for everybody. They're going to streamline it, just like technology streamlines other industries. It's the same sort of parallel concept. And so that's where the effects are really felt. To get back to the working capital stuff, there are predatory lenders in my sector. There are predatory lenders in every sector. They do these stupid working capital cash advance loans where you're giving accounts receivable away to a bank for 10, 15, 20% margins, meaning you borrow $100,000 so you can make payroll and pay your suppliers. And that money will cost you $20,000, $30,000 over 12 months. And it's paid back over 12 to 18 months. I refuse to do these loans. I will not allow my clients to do these loans. But they are out there, they are prevalent, and they are catastrophic to the economy because they put otherwise somewhat healthy businesses in dire straits if sales don't pick up. And so, there's just a multitude of factors when conventional lending shuts off. People get desperate and desperate people make bad decisions. And we're going to get real close to that probability by, I would say, end of January if things don't improve. And I mean improve rapidly.
Yeah. In Tucson, you know you're in a bad neighborhood when you see those payday loans or title loan places. And it's interesting to hear that that's a practice in the businesses or in the business world as well. So yeah, you talking about January. So we were talking a little bit before we started recording, but things are changing daily. So what's on that? You have some interesting predictions on your Twitter page. What do you think is on the table for the upcoming election and following?
In terms of what? which aspect? The economy and stimulus, or in terms of the election and how that's going to work with lawsuits and catastrophic results? Which part do you want to delve into?
Well, yeah, let's talk about stimulus first, and then we'll get into the potential for the contested election.
So I posted this earlier. I don't know if you saw it. The eviction so let's talk about the evictions, because for renters and home foreclosures, this matters. The moratorium on evictions and foreclosures only applies to Fannie and Freddie backed loans. So I want you to think about this on how this all works. Okay. And I'll get into more detail in a second. If you have a Fannie and Freddie backed mortgage, the government, you're going to be able to stay in your house through the end of the year through executive order, because Fannie and Freddie are owned by the government. It is what it is. Same thing if you're a renter or a homeowner. If the person who owns the property has a Fannie or Freddie backed mortgage, they passed an executive order, no foreclosures. Okay, that's great. But that's ridiculous, because it is not solving any type of problem whatsoever. Majority of rental properties in this country, if you live in a single family unit, it's a different story, because that's not the issue that I'm getting at. But anybody who lives in a large apartment building or lives in a apartment development, there's no way that property owner has a Fannie or Freddie Mae back loan. There's no way, because of the lending limits. Okay, so those properties are owned outside of the Fannie and Freddie Mac system. Okay, I apologize for the dogs. I'm outside. Your listeners are gonna have to deal with it. So because of that, foreclosures and evictions are gonna be allowed to proceed on any property in which Fannie and Freddie do not hold the mortgage. Now, the private lenders basically gave people deferrals and whatnot that almost uniformly ended at the end of August. Between August and September, those deferrals and all of that just ended across the board for property owners. So what happens is you own a property where there's 100 units. All of those renters are at risk. All of them, unless the state has done something. And by the way, I think if the state has tried to do something, it's probably unconstitutional, and the landlords are gonna try to overturn it and evict the tenants that aren't paying, because they have to pay their mortgage and they have to pay their bondholders. So all of these evictions are quite literally coming to a head in the next 15 weeks. And so I want you to think about it this way. Say you had an eviction moratorium that ended on August 31st, which most of them did. The landlord on September 2nd or 1st is filing that eviction paperwork with the courts. I've asked my people on Twitter to do research. and just find out how many eviction proceedings have been filed nationwide. No one's got back to me. Maybe someone listening to this, they'll go do it. But I guarantee you it's enormous. And so what happens is all of those petitions for eviction are filed September 2nd, September 3rd, September 4th, September 5th, whatever the case may be. The renters, they have 30 days to pay back rent. You're not allowed to evict people in most states for 30 days for not paying rent. So what happens is 30 days from September 2nd is October 2nd. They haven't still paid their rent. That landlord's going to go to court. They're going to go seek a judgment against the renter, and then they're going to try to physically remove him within 14 days. So what ends up happening here is between now and probably October 15th, you're going to have a large wave of renters who are evicted from their homes. No one's talking about it. No one understands it. And if they do, they're just sweeping it under the rug. And I'm praying that Congress passes stimulus sometime in the next 5 to 10 days, because after that point, it's going to be too late for them to get the money in order to pay their landlords before they're physically removed from the property. So we're really under a time crunch as relates to stimulus. And quite frankly, I think that in and of itself, I would expect in the next 2 to 3 days that the media starts harping on that issue, because if you have a brain and understand the law in any capacity, you understand that this is coming. And I'm praying that the media start ramping up the pressure on Congress to actually pass this bill. Because if they do not only you're going to see the shit that's going on in the stock market, which I'm not an expert on and I don't care. It's just going to keep going down until they pass it, because it is what it is, because it's a fake Ponzi scheme. But you're going to have real pain for Americans if they don't have this money, because they're not going to be able to buy food and they're not going to be able to pay rent. And they quite literally are going to get evicted from their homes. And that's going to lead to, I don't even want to know what type of chaos over the next 4 to 6 weeks if you have a mass eviction thing going on in multiple states nationally. Never mind the fact that half of the Democratic states are quite literally fundamentally bankrupt and can't make their payrolls. So something's got to give here. I mean, I know that it's politics. I know that it's hardball. And I get it all. But if they don't do something and they dig their heels in because of XYZ, it's just going to devastate the people. It's going to devastate the consumer, which is going to weigh on small business. It's going to weigh on big business. And it's going to weigh on everybody if they don't figure out how to get money into people's hands. There are two things that in this world, at the end of the day, people care about. One is housing, one is food. If both of those are in jeopardy because you have food prices rising and you can't pay your rent, bad things happen. And we're getting real close to that point.
Yeah, it's pretty apparent we're in some desperate need of stimulus, and it's really the only option that we have. Tucson is interesting in the extent of the wealth inequality that we are experiencing here. So the stat in 2017 was that about a quarter of Tucson was below the poverty line. And so a lot of those individuals are going to be living in the types of apartments that you were talking about and are at risk of eviction. And that's pretty wild to think about that. I mean, it's probably higher than that, because what we know is a large portion of the country, somewhere around 50%, couldn't pay an unexpected $400 bill before the crisis started, let alone now that after the COVID shutdowns have really wrecked all these different jobs and shut down these businesses. I can't imagine.
Now, that being said, you know, the states and local governments and counties are trying to stop the foreclosures. But speaking purely, you know, just from a legal side of things, I'm not sure that them trying to stop these evictions and foreclosures is constitutionally legal. Like, I have a significant opinion that the landlords are going to win these lawsuits, because they have mortgages that they have to pay also. And the bondholders who own the commercial real estate have investors that they need to pay also. So if you're not bailing out the bondholders or the guys who own the property, which currently we are not, and nor should we, in my opinion, you have to allow the evictions because they have to replace them with tenants. You're in a no-win situation here as relates to this. So catastrophe looms within 3 weeks, and I'm just going to leave it there.
Yeah, so the choices on the table right now are to print lots of money and just throw it everywhere you can in an attempt to try and stop the sinking ship, or to, I don't know. I mean, I have thoughts of like the potential of like, them trying to nationalize housing altogether, which is kind of a wild.
Oh, I have thoughts about lots of things that I won't get into, but that would not be out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
Nothing is at this point.
Yeah. Anything goes. So you think that Trump's the Republicans are gonna cave on the Democratic stimulus bill? Was that what you were saying?
I don't think they're going to have much of a choice, quite frankly, because if they don't, what I just told you is going to play out, and you can't have hungry, homeless people right before an election. And I mean, I'm not a market guy. It's not my thing, but I am fairly confident that the only thing Trump is running on is the stock market. He talks about it every 5 minutes. And I have a sneaking suspicion that the market is about to have a very, very, very bad couple of days if they don't pass stimulus. And I just happen to think that at the end of the day, you're going into an election. And I want you to, let's talk about the justice stuff in a second because it plays into this. I happen to think that it would be suicide for a stimulus bill not to be passed. I think it ends very, very, very badly for the Republicans not to pass stimulus. At the end of the day, the way I view it is this. And by the way, I'm a Republican. Well, I'm not a Republican. I'm a libertarian, but I slant Republican because I cannot vote for a Democrat under any circumstance. So at the end of the day, the bottom line is this. They've passed a stimulus bill. The Democrats have. The Republicans disagree with it. But at the end of the day, the Democrats have passed a stimulus bill. They want to give $3.5 trillion, which would help everybody. Now, Trump doesn't want to bail out states and local governments. That's his choice. That's fine. But at the end of the day, the Democrats want to give $2,400 to certain families, backdated, by the way, through, I forget the date, but it's backdated $2,400. So you're talking about, for certain middle-class families, $10,000 checks instantaneously. Like, this is not a little number. So the high ground, to me, belongs with the Democrats. And, I thought a stimulus bill was coming this week, by the way, had Ruth Bader Ginsburg not died. I think it was coming. I think it would have been more scaled down. Some things would have been, removed. Now, I think the stimulus bill that's coming is $3 trillion plus, because the Republicans, in my view, are in the position of this. They want a Supreme Court justice. They want it at all costs, which is fine. But I don't think the guy who works for Mercedes changing tires, or the dental assistant, or the volleyball coach, or the teacher, or the guy who programs software for Oracle gives two shits about the Supreme Court justice. That guy cares about the following. Can I buy food? Can I pay my rent? Or can I pay my mortgage? If those answers are no, and the answer is, well, and the spin hasn't started yet, but believe me, the spin's coming. Well, we're not doing stimulus because you needed to put a justice through. I promise you, mind you, I want a conservative on the court personally, but I can guarantee you that people who are in the middle and who are undecided don't give two flying fucks what happens with the Supreme Court. They care about what happens tomorrow. Can they pay rent and can they buy food? And if they can't do that because you want to put a justice through, you're going to have problems as that party. It's really, I could be wrong on that, but I really don't think I am.
Yeah, it seems like kind of a non-issue compared to what we're up against right now. People, I saw this week that there's a new startup company that's like an Uber for evictions, where you can hire, if you're a landlord, you can hire process servers.
Did Steve Mnuchin found it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing that he's the treasurer. I can't talk right now. Secretary of the Treasury right now. It's after what he pulled in 2008. We're following it, but yeah, yeah, it seems like a non-issue in comparison. It's pretty wild to think about. So pretty much, if the Democrats get that stimulus passed, it seems like Biden might have the election in his pocket. Is that what you're thinking?
No, I wouldn't say that. I just know that if they don't pass the stimulus, I'm not sure that we get to the election. Because we're talking about people evicted, and that is coming. No one's talking about it, but I'm flat out telling you, by mid-October, people are getting evicted. Whether the media covers it or not, the same way they didn't really cover the Oregon riots for about 6 weeks, that's up to them. But people will be evicted within the next 2 weeks if they don't have the money to pay their landlords. So am I convinced that this means Biden wins if there's stimulus? No. The same way I'm not convinced that Biden doesn't win if there's no stimulus. But what I do know is if they don't do it, what I think the American people are going to think, which is, are we really prioritizing a judge over me being able to buy food or pay my rent? I think it's as simple as that. I think the Democratic message will be as simple as that. And I think it's going to resonate. And I will tell you, I did an interview with, if you listen to it, with Chris Darkey a couple of days ago, and I didn't even think of the Affordable Care Act angle. That case is scheduled to be heard the week after the election. Well, from what I have been told, they plan on making COVID. Now, whether this happens or not is irrelevant, because we're talking about, for argument's sake, and how they're going to frame things for voters and things like that. They're talking about claiming that COVID is a pre-existing condition. If they get rid of the Affordable Care Act, the biggest thing in the Affordable Care Act, among anything else in that law, is the prohibition on denying insurance for pre-existing conditions. I am never going to vote for a Democrat, personally. But if they nominate this justice and this justice is seated, and that case I know is coming before the court a week after the election, I am voting for Joe Biden, because they will, for sure, with the makeup of the current court, strike down the ACA. And by the way, they don't have to seat the justice. That's another story, but it will make it slam dunk. The ACA will be overturned. And I don't want to get into that on this podcast. It's beyond the scope of what we're talking about here. But for legal reasons, the ACA is dead when it gets to the Supreme Court as it's currently constructed, unless John Roberts upholds it. But if they get this justice in, it's 100% dead. And the insurance companies are going to get rid of the prohibition on denying coverage for pre-existing conditions. That in and of itself, I happen to think, if the Democrats skew their message that way, means Biden wins in a landslide. And I do mean landslide, because food, shelter, healthcare. They are food and shelter are 1 and 2, but healthcare is for sure a close third. And if people's healthcare are in jeopardy for pre-existing conditions, I mean, the way they talk about COVID and how it can affect the kidneys, the lungs, the heart, you can make a claim legally, and I'm telling you this as a lawyer, that everything, if you have a COVID antibody, is related to COVID, and thus your coverage is denied. Now, whether the media goes down this path, how far down that path they want to go, can't tell you. But the fact that a pre-existing condition is in jeopardy of that protection going away, for me personally, I will vote for Biden with double fists because I don't like his policies. There's nothing I'll ever agree with a Democrat. But I personally think, given where we are with the state of the pandemic and things of that nature, that overrides any other concerns I have, and I will deal with voting him out in 4 years. But you cannot have pre-existing conditions be eliminated in the middle of a pandemic. That's absolute insanity. And that's why I saw Pelosi doing it the other night. I happen to not even think about it, but now that I've thought about it, this will become the number one issue of the entire election.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting if it does because the president likes to go left of whatever, the Democratic candidate. He did it to Hillary Clinton. And it'll be interesting to see if he does it on healthcare, but I don't know. It'll be, yeah, that's a pretty wild, idea of I mean, it's really crazy what's happening in the insurance industry as a whole and healthcare in general. And I've had some experience working in it, just seeing everything getting consolidated. It's just one big oligopoly pretty much, and it's growing more and more so.
You a fan of George? You're a fan of George Carlin?
I haven't listened to a ton of George Carlin.
You are.
Yeah,
you should, because you should listen to The Big Club.
Oh yeah,
we ain't. You should go do that when we get off this podcast, and I would highly recommend. I would listen to everything that guy had to say because he is politically genius, and I wish he was alive today because he would quite literally have exploded to a degree that he never did because he wasn't around during social media. But everything that he talked about in the 90s and early 2000s is coming to fruition right now. He was a little early, but he wasn't wrong about anything. And he's my favorite comedian of all time.
Yeah, I am familiar with The Big Club. There's been a saying recently that I like, a term that I've been using a lot, which is wage slavery. And I think that's another good play off of The Big Club, and you're not in it, just being dependent.
But
go ahead.
I have to tell you, you have to do two things. You have to promise me this. You will listen to Prison Farms and airline announcements before tonight's over.
All right. Prison Farms and airline announcements.
They're fantastic. You will like them.
All right.
Go ahead with the rest.
Yeah. So I've been having a lot of different conversations with people, and I've always been somebody who has had this gut feeling that there's something wrong. And I am what you would call a third culture kid. I think that's what it's called, where I grew up kind of in between cultures, living over in Ukraine for a short bit, and then coming and moving to the US and not fitting into either one, just like seeing things from kind of an outside perspective. A lot of the people that I've been talking to and have followed over the years, it's interesting to, kind of like you talked about, his predictions coming true. You can see like the hypocrisy and shortcomings in our society, and see the potential implications of them over a long term. And I feel like right now it's a really important time to be, as overwhelming as it is, to be in the midst of the chaos, which, I kind of thrive in these types of situations because I'm a little bit addicted to chaos. But Uh, yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why I've fallen into Bitcoin is because it's um, a completely different monetary policy that addresses a lot of the issues that we're seeing today. What do you have any exposure or experience with Bitcoin?
I have zero, and I beg you to get rid of your Bitcoin
All right.
because I don't see a scenario where it's going to survive more than 5 to 10 years. I think it is a placeholder for what comes next. And I have a lot of reasons for that. The main one being, and I know what you're about to say, which is it's outside the system and it can't be controlled by government and blah, blah, blah. I don't care. At the end of the day, the government makes laws. They can find a way to make sure that Bitcoin is unsustainable and or it loses value. And they have the guns and missiles. And I get it. I really don't want to debate you on it because I really like where this podcast has been. But I am not a believer in Bitcoin. I'm a believer in cryptocurrencies because I think that's the future. But I don't believe that Bitcoin is in any way, shape, or form where it ends up. I think that there are going to be technologies that replace it, just like there are Edison made a light bulb and then light bulbs were improved, right? I think you're going to have that evolution. I think Bitcoin was first, but it's not the adopted thing. I think there's something either invented that we don't know about, or that's out there and is going to be adopted, or there's something still to come. But it's not Bitcoin for many, many, many reasons. And I think if governments really felt Bitcoin was a threat, they would have already cramped down on it. But they're not. They're letting it float. And I personally would tell you, just crypto, yes. The technology that Bitcoin espouses, yes. Bitcoin itself, no way.
Yeah, that's interesting. No, I appreciate it. I definitely don't want to push back because I'm kind of curious to hear a little bit more on the opinion. So where would you encourage people to have their money right now? Are you a gold person or?
I don't have a clue.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have thought gold would be considered a safe haven right now, but gold, I think today sold off like 4%. Silver is down like 30% in 5 days. I mean, I have no clue. I think here's the deal, and I think you'll recognize this, especially if you like Bitcoin. We're at the end of a Ponzi scheme, so all bets are off on everything, right? So I just think at the end of the day, it's not Bitcoin that's what matters. So do I think it's gold? I hope it's gold. I'm a gold guy because I think it's real money, right? I think it's money for 3,000 years. I think it's what people are going to want at the end of the day. I know central banks are buying it. I know governments are buying it. I am smart enough to follow the money. If the governments are buying gold and the central banks are buying gold, I want to follow what they're doing. So do I think gold has a role here in some form or fashion? Yes. Do I know how or where we get there? Nope. No idea. But I mean, I quite literally don't understand anything going on right now because the market's fake. Everybody knows it's fake. It's inflated by fake dollars. Everybody who buys Bitcoin subscribes to this. We all know this. But where this ends up and how we get there, no clue.
Sure. Yeah, that's a really interesting take on it. Yeah, we'll see what happens with gold. I'm watching it pretty closely. We had a pretty big sell-off, and same thing with Bitcoin. But yeah, it is, I was doing a lot of pondering on that today. As far as I've placed a pretty big bet on Bitcoin.
I mean, honestly, the reasonable answer is nobody knows. You're in the middle of a Ponzi scheme.
Mm-hmm.
You're in the middle of 1971 we went off the gold standard. You're in the middle of a 50-year Ponzi scheme, and you're near the end of it. So all bets are off as far as everything goes. I just have an opinion that it's not Bitcoin.
Sure.
I think the technology was put in place for somebody else to adopt and improve upon, and Bitcoin ends up by the wayside. But the technology is real. So if you can tell me how to invest in the technology, I'm on board, but I'm not investing in Bitcoin.
Interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting point that you brought up. If governments felt that it was a threat, they would have cracked down more on it. And there are some, typical responses to that. But yeah, for the sake of this, I won't get into it. But yeah. So what do you see for the future of American small businesses?
Pain. They need to start lending, or we're gonna have pain in quarter one. I mean, do you follow Greg Minorino at all?
No.
You should. He's been pretty spot on about a lot of the stuff that's going on, and being a Bitcoin guy, I think you would like him a lot, actually. But he thinks it's a culling, that they're trying to get rid of small businesses so they can impose whatever the new world order is going to be. And given the way lending's going, I don't know that let's put it this way. In April, I thought he was a crackpot. Now I think he might actually be onto every single thing that's going on. So if you're in the business of lending money and understanding money and dealing with small business, and I'm dealing with 25 different banks at all different levels of the scale, from a $200,000 loan to a $50 million loan, right? I'm dealing up and down the scale. There's something going on that's bigger than I can interpret, and I'm not smart enough to do it. I have some guesses, which I've sort of talked about here, but something big, way bigger than I can fathom this happening. And so his theory is basically that small businesses are being culled in favor of big business bailouts, and so basically, for all intents and purposes, it's the literal definition of fascism. I don't want to go that far. I don't want to sound like a loon, but I don't know I don't know another word to describe it other than fascism at this point. We're going to bail out the airlines for what, $50 billion? Well, give that to the people. I guarantee the airlines don't need a bailout, right? I just don't understand the priorities and the prerogatives that are going on. So there's something bigger going on. And like George Carlin said, it's a big club and we ain't in it. So all we're doing is guessing what they expect to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I could totally see that. I like to watch the House hearings when they march the tech people in and just yell at them, and just it's
for show. There's no other reason. They don't even know what they're talking about. I mean, hell, I mean, I'm an older millennial, and I understand tech. I don't understand tech the way you do, I promise you. And I look at these people asking these questions, and I'm like, oh my God, you understand quite literally nothing. I'm like, there are things that get said, and I'm like, I have no idea what people are talking about. And I use tech. I'm a millennial. I grew up with it, so I understand a lot of it. Right? You're going to understand way more than me. That's how it's going to work going down the chain. Right? I would argue that probably a 12-year-old has more knowledge of technology than I do when it comes to the internet and programming and stuff like that. But that's how it works. But congressmen are absolutely useless. They have no clue. They're literally, and I hate saying this, but they are retards when it comes to asking these questions, because half of them don't even know what email is and how to set up a web page and how to set up a YouTube channel. They are phenomenally incompetent when it comes to tech.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. One of them was blasting the CEO of Alphabet about why his campaign emails were going to people's spam box, and it's like that's what you're going to use your time for. But yeah, I mean, it feels like where we're at right now. The Federal Reserve's job is to protect the big banks. The big banks are not here to serve, their customers. It's almost like they're here to consume their customers. And then, the government is here to protect, the system and to allow these companies to gain more power. And one of the crazy things that I saw, it was a headline about, all the big banks like JP Morgan, HSBC, and of course, Deutsche Bank, the dirtiest bank of them all, were
Shocking.
What's that?
I said shocking.
Yeah.
Deutsche Bank and HSBC were involved. Very shocking.
Yeah. I mean, they just got busted for money laundering again for nefarious characters. And,
what for spoofing metal prices? Yeah. I don't know if your listeners know this, so I'm going to help you out. And if you didn't see this, I suggest you see it. Did you see the article about the quote unquote inflows into the silver ETF? Did you see this?
I think I might have skimmed across it, but no, I didn't take note of it. So to help you out, silver on a bullion basis, meaning what people buy coins with and the bars and whatnot, is 15% of what is mined out of the ground. Okay. Fair? Mm-hmm.
The silver ETF, ProShares or whoever the hell holds this, I don't know. I don't care. They've had 40% of the silver that was mined this year, quote unquote, inflowed into the fund. So what? Only 15% goes to bullion. But the fund got 40% in 40% inflow into physical bullion. Something doesn't add up here. It's all manipulated. It's all ridiculous, and it's all a joke. So I understand why all you guys like Bitcoin, because it's off the grid. Trust me, we all share the same philosophy. But I highly recommend your listeners look into that about the bullion percent that is put into, the silver mining that's put into bullion versus what the silver ETF claims that they've put into bullion in the vaults that people can redeem should they want it. Very interesting. 40% increase in the last 6 months. Interesting considering, Pan American Silver, which is one of the largest silver miners in the world, quite literally did not put the silver into the market until Q3 because they were waiting for higher prices. So I would really love to know how they got a 40% inflow when one of the biggest miners wouldn't put any of their silver into the market. Very interesting scenario as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And, just happens to coincide with JP Morgan getting $1 billion fine, for manipulating metals prices, which my guess is they made back today with silver down 8%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. One of the funniest things that I saw, I can't remember if it was this year or last year. Everything's just such a blur, but Stephen Nation was discussing about how the dollar has never been used for nefarious activities, and referring to Bitcoin as being, that thing that you can go and use to buy drugs on the internet and whatever, and just like seeing the scale at which this manipulation and
it's absurd.
Yeah,
it's absurd. You and I live in the same world, except I don't believe in Bitcoin. I believe in gold and silver. Yeah. We live in the exact same world. Trust me.
Yeah.
It's just that I have a feeling that Bitcoin is going to get overrun by governments. And it's why I would buy it on the tech. If there was a technology, right? So I've had many people tell me to buy Ripple because it's being integrated with banks and things like that. Now, I don't know enough about the space, right? So I don't know. But I buy the technology aspect because I know we're going digital. I know we're going digital fiat, and I know it's going to be on a scale that nobody can imagine, right? I know that's coming.
Sure.
I just don't subscribe to Bitcoin being part of that solution, which is why I don't like it. That's why I'm in gold and silver. But in terms of, personally being against the system and thinking it's a joke, you will never find a bigger advocate than me, ever.
Sure. Yeah. Please don't invest in Ripple. That's a bunch of garbage. And it's a
I
big, yeah, I'm glad you, just because banks are investing. Yeah.
I'm doing research.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I think like one of the biggest aspects when you're talking about the technology of what makes something like a cryptocurrency so powerful is its ability to self-settle, meaning that you don't need third-party intermediaries to facilitate the transaction. So I had a funny conversation. This is like Christmas dinner conversation with my family last year, where we were sitting around and talking about how we would come up with a potential lawsuit against a business that refused to take cash in downtown Chicago. Because my stepdad wanted to buy a muffin and they refused and made him.
I don't think they can, quite frankly, actually.
Yeah. Well, it's, I don't know, it may be illegal, but it's kind of a growing thing, especially like right now. I've seen a lot more businesses go away from cash. And the danger of that is it locks so many people out of the system because we have so many people that are unbanked. That operate only on cash. Or, I was even talking to a business owner who just bought a barber shop, and these people were not paying taxes and living on cash only. They would be completely locked out if we moved away from cash. So, we need something that self-settles, unless we're going to have everybody be completely dependent on the banking system, which, a lot of us already are. And so that's one of the really interesting ideas. And when the House is talking about implementing a digital dollar, that's a big discussion point that's coming up, is the ability to, oh, go ahead.
Let me stop you for a second.
Sure.
Because you're young. Do you gamble at all?
No. Well, I
All
own
right.
Bitcoin, so you might think that's gambling.
Well, that's not gambling. Okay. Well, it is, but that's responsible gambling because you have a position and you're sticking to it and you'll see what happens. There's a difference. That's not true gambling. All right. I'm going to give you a gambling sort of analogy here. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
When you play blackjack, actually, that's less relevant. When you play poker, you want to feel the chips. You want to shuffle them in your hands. You want to move them between your fingers. You want to do XYZ. You don't want to touch a screen. I think it's the same thing when it comes to the dollar/money. I don't think people want to live in a world where they can't touch their money. I think it's really as simple as that. Now, I could be very wrong in that. You can call me old. I don't care. But if I go to a racetrack, I want to plop down $100 on the window and say, give me 100 to win on the 5-horse. I don't want to touch a digital screen. The same way that, and I'm going to give you the parallel. There's a reason that there are credit cards, because there are studies that show this, and we don't have to get into all of them. We don't have to get into them at all. But there are studies that show that people will spend less when they have to part with physical cash versus a credit card. This is not debate. This is fact. This has been studied ad nauseum. So it's the same thing to me with a digital currency only. I don't know that you'll ever get a true adoption of digital currency nationally and worldwide, because there are many people who want to hold their money. That if you want to ask my number one position with Bitcoin and why I'm against it, that's it. That's why I'm against the whole digital system in general. I don't think it's going to happen. I think there is going to be a digital system just like we have now. But you'll always be able to redeem it for something physical. And that's the shortcoming of Bitcoin. Because there are going to be plenty of people who will not subscribe to a digital system where someone can just computer virus or hack into their account and take all their money. Believe me, there are plenty of people who feel that way. It doesn't matter how secure someone says it is. It doesn't matter. There are going to be people who will not feel secure unless they can physically hold it.
Yeah, I definitely think about my my grandparents or my mom in that situation.
I don't even think it's that heavy. I think there are plenty of millennials who would feel the same.
Sure.
That they want to touch their money. Because how many times have you ever had your email hacked and everything erased? I have.
Mm-hmm.
I have. I've had it done personally. I've had it done in a business. Because I opened up a program, because there were I'm an older millennial. Computer viruses were rampant, right? They put the picture of the hot girl on the screen when you're 22. You open it, you click it, you have a computer virus. What if all of a sudden you did that and all of your money was gone? Because that's what you're talking about if you go totally digital. That will happen to plenty of people. And so that's why I don't know how you have full digital adoption, because I don't know how you can ever solve that issue. I don't know how you can solve the stupidity problem, I guess, more importantly.
What do you mean about the stupidity problem?
Meaning people clicking on things they shouldn't, signing up for things they shouldn't, phishing emails, all that stuff. It's the stupidity factor.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily you. It's not me. But there are people that are, 45 years old where that still applies. 50 years old where that still applies. So you still have 30 years. Say, let's call the cutoff 50 just for argument's sake. You have people who will need money for the next 30 years who are plainly stupid when it comes to technology.
Yeah, it's definitely a steep literacy learning curve. And that's the thing that's so frustrating about cryptocurrencies, is because it is such a huge paradigm shift. We've seen all these scams on YouTube where there's these paid advertisements. You send me X amount, I'll send you back double. And of course that never follows through.
It's the the African Somali scam, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
The Nigeria scam. It's the same thing.
Yep.
But if you eliminate physical dollars and physical money, it doesn't have to be dollars, just physical money in general. Well, that scam becomes a lot more problematic, right? So it's just I get where everybody's going with crypto and digital and all of that, but I think it's 20 to 30 years away. I'm on the older side, right? You're what, 22, 23, I'm guessing. You're 20 years younger than me, right? I'm on the older side of the equation, but I understand it. I'm going to be one of the last adopters because I still remember the old system, right? But you've got 30 years of people that need to die off before your system has any chance of being adopted nationally and worldwide. You just do. Because I'll adopt it because I understand how to mitigate my risks. My parents who are 60, 65 years old, they have no clue how to mitigate their risks at all. They'd be like, I have to put my money online and it can get hacked by some pirate. No, I don't want that at all. That's what you're dealing with. And you have another 20 more years before that goes away. I'll adopt it, when I know it's safe, because I know that I'll know it's safe. My parents will have no clue. Right. And that's what you have to factor into all of this discussion. And I think between now and the next 20 years, I know you're a Bitcoin guy. That's why I don't think Bitcoin makes it, because I think something's going to usurp it before you get that widespread adoption. Right. I think it's the precursor to whatever comes. So I get it. And I believe in the concept. I think we're going crypto. I think we're going blockchain. I think we're going everything that Bitcoin represents. But I think at the end of the day, there's something that the governments are going to install that usurps it. And we come back to, if you want to be outside the system, because if the government's going digital, you want to be physical, right? So I think you end up being in gold. I think you're more a gold bug than you think you are, because the government's going digital. So you want to be the opposite of what they're doing. You want to be in physical.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And yeah, I do think I'm more of I am a gold bug. And I just I'm just uneducated. I don't know where to get gold from. And I think that's one of the things that like drives people around my age to Bitcoin is just the ease of access. But yeah, I appreciate your perspectives on it, because I feel like it's always important to, be able to listen to the pushback and welcome it, because it strengthens your perspective. And I do think you have a lot of really legitimate concerns around it. And the demographic.
I'm in the middle, right?
Yeah.
I'm not you, right? I know everybody your age loves crypto, Bitcoin, all that. I get it. Like, I understand all that. I'm in the middle. So I understand old money. I understand gold. I understand fiat. I understand Bitcoin. I mean, I don't understand Bitcoin the way you guys want to espouse it and all that First Amendment bullshit that's literally ridiculous. But, and I'm telling you that as a lawyer, it's quite literally ridiculous. Don't ever bring that up to anybody. It will never fly. It will get overturned in 5 seconds. But it's just one of those things where it's a generational thing. And being in the middle as an older millennial, I actually can see both sides. And I know that what you guys are espousing is the future. In terms of what it's going to be, it's just not going to be Bitcoin. And I keep trying to tell people that, like, and I think of it this way: when's the last time a non-government sanctioned, form of currency was allowed to exist? It doesn't. And when you consider the fact that majority of the Bitcoin holders and owners are under, 30, 35, 40 years of age. Well, you guys aren't in power, and you're not going to get power for 20 years. You're going to get railroaded. You just don't know it yet, and you don't know how yet. And people are going to want to hold on to power, because people who hold dollars and are like, Bitcoin, what the fuck is that? Are going to be like, yeah, no, we're going to protect dollars and we're going to get rid of Bitcoin because I'm not going to lose my wealth to a 20-year-old millennial. And I don't think that your demographic fully understands the power of like boomers, because they're quite literally going to ensure that you guys get fucked. They won't do it on purpose necessarily, but they're going to ensure it because they're going to protect their own wealth.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't have a lot of wealth or sway to be able to determine or influence a whole lot. I can get on my social media and
but think of it this way.
Yeah.
When's the last time a 25-year-old changed the financial system? Because that's what we're really talking about, right? A bunch of 20 to 30-year-olds being like, yeah, we're going to upset the whole financial system. We're going to revolutionize it. Yeah, I get it. I agree. It needs to happen, but sorry, you're not going to do it. and more importantly, you're sure as hell not going to get rich trying to do it. You're going to get destroyed trying to do it. So, the powers that be, money makes the world go round, and you're trying to change the money of the world. Like, just understand what the people who espouse Bitcoin are literally trying to do. It's a fuck you to every government that exists in the world. Like, that's just not going to happen. I'm sorry. I love all you guys. I espouse the theories. I hate the governments right along with you. It's just not going to happen. Like, just be realistic. They got tanks, military, police, militia, governments. Like, there's just so many ways that it's just no good. It's just going nowhere. But I love the theory. Believe me, I think it's coming. Again, it's not going to be Bitcoin.
Yeah, we'll see what happens over the next few months. I think.
Oh no, but just so we're clear, because if any of your Bitcoin people listen to this, I'm going to get a bazillion like hate tweets. I think Bitcoin's going to like $40,000, $50,000. Just so you know that. Bitcoin's going through the roof. And then it's going to zero. So if you can ride that speculation train all the way up, because I think it's going way up, just like everything else that is an anti-government sort of position is going way up, then the governments are going to be like, okay, that's enough. Time to go home, and I'm going to take my ball and you got to go home. I think that's what happens. So I think there's money to be made. I think there's a lot of money to be made if you're in Bitcoin. Just don't be the one last in line because you're going to get destroyed. But Bitcoin is for sure going up in the short term. It's just a question of when they execute the final solution and destroy you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm willing to ride it out till the end because I feel like if Bitcoin fails, there's a lot bigger problems than just me losing some money. But so kind of on a different topic, we've been talking a lot of doom and gloom. What are some things? Oh, what were you saying?
I said I'm good at that.
Yeah, I am too. It's where I naturally kind of sit. What are some things that are giving you hope for the future right now?
None. I have none. Sorry. Sorry to your listeners. I have none. Until this election's over, I have none. Because I think there's too many variables. I don't see any of them being positive. I see all of them being negative. And until I see the result, I think we're in status quo towards catastrophe. I think if Trump or Biden can win in a landslide fashion election night, a lot of my fears will go away. I don't see any scenario where that happens, though. Like, I don't see a single scenario where that can happen. So because of that, I have no hope for anything. Sorry. Just don't.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I personally, I struggle to see, I kind of see the election ending up in violence if Trump were to win.
Why?
If Trump were to win, but if Biden were to win, I don't really see the same potential for violence.
I do. I do, and I do in one scenario. It's only one scenario where I see that happening. If Biden wins election night, all of the problems disappear in that regard. But the worst case scenario, and I do quite literally mean the worst case scenario possible, is Trump winning election night and mail-in ballots coming in over the next 2 weeks where Biden starts winning. And Trump saying, yeah, I'm not going to honor these at all. I'm the president. Screw you. I don't even have words for what's going to happen if that happens. I literally don't. Let's put it this way. I have 9 months worth of food and water in my garage. I'm just going to leave it at that. And we can drop the subject right there. Because I have that much food. I have 25,000 rounds. I have guns. My house is not the house to screw with. But that's what it's going to come to if that scenario plays out. Because that scenario leads to military on the streets. Are you familiar with Tom Cotton?
A little bit, yeah.
He's a senator from Arkansas who, during the protests for George Floyd, were calling for Marines to be deployed on our streets with tanks to, quote, put down the protesters. That's what's coming if Trump wins on election night and then Biden starts pulling ahead. Because you're going to have about 45 days. We didn't get into the specifics, but the way that the litigation will work is you'll have a 45-day lag. You're going to have 2 rounds of litigation. The first is, what is the cutoff date for what we count in each state, right? That's the first thing that gets litigated. Okay, we have ballots. Some ballots were submitted November 3rd, some November 10th, some October 15th. What gets counted? Do we have a national standard? That's the first round of litigation. But that's not where the fun starts. The fun starts as the ballots start getting counted. And then there are legal challenges to what was counted. Well, that was ballot harvested. That's not that guy's signature. That's fraud. That guy's an illegal immigrant. He's not allowed to vote. You don't get to that level until probably mid-December because you have to challenge each individual ballot. Then you have to get through the court system. Then you have to get to the Supreme Court. So, in my opinion, there's no way, absent a clear victory election night, that this election is decided before Inauguration Day. And so the question becomes, what happens between, say, November 10th and, say, January 1st? Is Trump rounding up the militia? Are the Democrats inciting riots? Who the hell knows? I don't know. You don't know. Nobody knows because we don't know the results. But if there's no clear result on November 3rd, God help us all. Because Trump's Twitter is not going to stop. And the left is not going to stop. So there's no scenario where this ends well at all unless there's a clear-cut victory on election night. And the only clear-cut victory you're going to have is if Biden wins because of demographics for the country, right? I mean, Trump could win the Electoral College the same way Republicans have won it for years. That's fine. But from a pure demographic perspective, the only way a clear-cut victory happens is if Biden wins. If you don't have that, watch out. And if they haven't passed stimulus between now and November 3rd, you're adding broke, evicted, chaos with no possibility of stimulus till the earliest being February. Because once the election's contested, there's no way Congress is passing anything. So if they don't get it done in the next 2 to 3 weeks, you're talking about probably February before something happens in the best case scenario. So this is a very, very, very bad time for many people because they don't give a shit about you. And it's all about power, and power grabs don't end well if there's a potential coup involved. And I don't lean one way or the other. I just know what both sides are going to say.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens, and at that point, it kind of depends on which way the military is going to lean and who they're going to back as to deciding the future.
I'm going to pray that it doesn't come to that.
Yeah, I really hope not too. Well,
how long did we talk? This was pretty long.
Yeah, it's been a while, probably about 2 hours. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the channel and talking. I feel like I learned a lot. I'm going to have to listen back and dissect the things you were talking about. But yeah.
It is what it is, man. It's just, I'm unbiased. It is what it is. So I don't have an agenda because clearly I have no monetary impetus here. So I just spout it as I see it. And I'm praying I'm wrong about a few things. But honestly, I've been right since June about a lot. I don't see me being wrong now. It's just everything's coming to a head. And we didn't even get into the worldwide issues, which are another factor, which is even scarier.
Yep.
So I will leave your listeners with this. The last act of every desperate government in the history of the world is to start a war. And everybody should be very, very, very much paying attention to Libya, Greece, Turkey, and China, Taiwan, China, India, and everything in the Middle East, because always the Middle East. So, we didn't get into my background on geopolitics. I'm not going to do that here. I have one. We're just not going to get into it. But that is the biggest danger to the world is bombs dropping somewhere while the U.S. is at their weakest in the next 4 months. And that, if you want to know my biggest fear, it's that. Because I don't know how you're going to galvanize an American people to do something when we're divided to go fight a war that we don't want to fight when we're broke. So that's where I'll leave that. And hopefully your listeners had some value.
Yeah. Well, I think for everybody listening, they now understand why you are the Fed Up Biz owner.
I do my best. I appreciate you, man.